Transhumanizm neyi amaçlıyor? Transhümanist devrimin olası yararları veya tehditleri nelerdir?
What does transhumanism aim for? What are the possible benefits or threats of the transhumanist revolution?
Well, what we have just been discussing regarding genetic determinism and human freedom, especially freedom of the will, continues to be very important now that the Human Genome Project is largely behind us. It's important in two additional domains. One is neuroscience and the whole concept of brain determinism. And then that's the puppet determinism part of it. Then Promethean determinism comes roaring back in the form of transhumanism. So let me begin by saying a few words about neurodeterminism. As it turns out, as our laboratory scientists learn more and more about the human brain, it turns out the human brain is more complex than the human genome. And so that in itself is going to disqualify genetic determinism as being overly influential, because the brain, which is a product of the genes, operates at a level of complexity higher than the genes. So now the question becomes, does the brain make up our mind before you and I make up our mind? There is a phenomenon called automaticity. So if Furkan right now were to aim his finger at my eye, and his finger gets close to my eye would close in protection. That's an automatic reaction that my brain puts into place. I don't even think about it. So if you're a brain theorist, you ask, is everything in our mind automatic? And so when it comes to deliberation, decision, and action, could that be an illusion because the brain has dictated in advance what we would deliberate on, the decisions we make and the actions that we take? Now, what I find is if I talk to a brain scientist, a person in the laboratory, who's actually examining human brains, they just want to know how the brain works. They don't have any philosophy about free will or human nature. The whole idea of neurodeterminism comes not from the researchers in the laboratory. No, it comes from the philosophers who are trying to interpret neuroscience to the wider world. I think, again, as I said, with regard to our discussion of genetic determinism, the real issue, philosophical issue, is whether or not a human self exists. And if you believe that the mind is nothing more than an expression of what the brain does, there's no room in that for human self. But your and my experience is of ourselves as agents engaging in deliberation, decision, and action. It would seem to me the job of the brain scientist is to explain that, not explain it away. So it's my own tentative conclusion. The human self exists, and that's theologically important because our religious traditions want us to cooperate, to make decisions, to live a godly life. And we can't rely on either the genes or the brain to voluntarily make those decisions and exact those religious or spiritual disciplines. So that's my take on neurodeterminism, neurophilosophy, and the human self that deliberates, makes decisions, and takes actions. Now we turn to Promethean determinism and the rise of the transhumanist movement. And you'll find transhumanists in almost every big city around the world these days. They're largely techies. They love computers and gadgets and artificial intelligence. And of course, the great computer companies are going to have a large number of transhumanists in them. And there is such excitement. As we said earlier, Prometheanism during the Human Genome Project was getting control of DNA so that we can guide the evolution of the human race into the future. The transhumanists today want to do the same thing, but they have more than just DNA to work with. Bio-nanotechnology, that is to say, computer chips connected to DNA and connected to the cyber cloud, all of these things come together and give great hope, great inspiration for human transformation. One of the assumptions that the transhumanists make is that artificial intelligence, which currently takes the form of information processing, will become increasingly complex until finally that complexity in information processing will take a leap and become intelligent and super intelligent, that is to say, more intelligent than you and I, who made the machine in the first place. Super intelligence. Well, accompanying that, secondly, is human enhancement. So apart from an artificial intelligence in our friendly neighborly robot, we will enhance the biological intelligence of the human brain. How to do that? Well, the first step would be to surgically implant a small computer chip. Actually, this is already being done at Stanford University for therapeutic processes, but that computer chip just provides electrical stimuli for the brain. But this transhumanist computer chip would have information on it, all the information of Wikipedia. So you start thinking and you want to answer a tough question, and your brain goes to the computer chip and it pulls out the answer. You can just wow all your friends with all of the knowledge that you have already in your brain from that computer chip. Now, again, the transhumanists make an assumption, very questionable assumption, but it goes like this, that the more information you get, the more intelligence you're going to have. Now, that's philosophically nonsense, and it's not yet been demonstrated in the laboratory, but it's a very important assumption. Now, I want to just report a conversation I had some years ago. Actually, it was with Nick Bostrom, who's a leading transhumanist. And it was a group of us at Stanford University just sipping our coffee and talking about these brain implants. And so Nick says, well, you know, once you've surgically implanted the chip, it'll be out of date in 2 weeks. So you have to have it updated. So what we'll do is we'll have a satellite signal connected to the chip in your brain. And every 2 weeks, you'll get an update of the information, and that'll be going on in perpetuity. Okay, that's a great idea. But, says Nick, what might go wrong? Well, suppose a tyrant gets a hold of the satellite and starts pumping fake news into your computer chip, deliberate lies that want to manipulate you. And then I contributed, I said, the most horrible thing that I could imagine the satellite would put in my brain computer chip would be advertising. Can you imagine never being able to get away from advertising? So what's going on here is human intelligence enhancement based upon a theory that information processing will lead to a jump or a leap into super intelligence. Well, the transhumanists have all kinds of wonderful visions of transformation in the future, but this is a form of Prometheanism, and in fact, some transhumanists actually use the word, we are Prometheans, meaning that the human race, as you and I are now members of it, will eventually go extinct and be replaced with a post-human who will be more intelligent and right along with it, more charitable and more nice, who will take care of the environment, make sure that justice is exacted on planet Earth, and all of these wonderful things, things that our religions had promised and failed to deliver on, we're now going to achieve scientifically. And if you may remember the myth of Prometheus, the reason Prometheus was punished by the god Zeus on Mount Olympus was his hubris. In English, that's pride, the belief that somehow or other we can play God and accomplish everything, make heaven on earth through science and technology. And science and technology don't have that power, but our transhumanist friends are very enthusiastic that we're on the brink of a transition from the human to the post-human. So again, I would call that Promethean determinism. Once you've let puppet determinism go by. Just as a footnote, I and some of my colleagues in Berkeley have been interviewing people who are religious transhumanists. One would think, oh my gosh, if you're a religious person, you want to stay away from Prometheus. But we have met a Buddhist transhumanist, Mormon transhumanists, and those who are most anti-transhumanism are Jewish people. Tend to be Christians, sort of, some are in favor of it, some not in favor of it, etc. And Furkan, I'm just going to mention, I've been looking for a Muslim transhumanist. I haven't found any yet. So maybe there's a deep antipathy there that would be difficult to bridge, but someday I hope to meet a Muslim transhumanist and see how those things go together. But right now, I think the exciting front of the field is the transhumanists are moving very rapidly in science and technology, and it's hard for us to get a religious grip or a spiritual grip as to what extent it should be supported and embraced, or to what extent should we be afraid that it's going to self-destruct, kind of like Prometheus did in the myth.